Occupied territories of Georgia are the territories occupied by Russia after the Russo-Georgian War in 2008. They consist of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, whose status is a matter of international dispute. After the war, Russian military bases were established in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Russia does not allow the European Union monitoring mission to enter either Abkhazia or South Ossetia. The Russian government, along with 3 others, recognizes Abkhazia and South Ossetia as sovereign states, and it has signed agreements with the de facto administrations of both to integrate them militarily and economically into Russia. Russian troops have started the process of demarcation near South Ossetia-Georgia administrative boundary line and meanwhile gradually advancing the occupation line inside Georgia to enlarge the Russian-held territory. Both Abkhazia and South Ossetia are widely recognized as integral parts of the Republic of Georgia. The Georgian Law on Occupied Territories of Georgia, adopted in 2008, criminalizes entry into Abkhazia and South Ossetia from the Russian side. Such entry is prosecutable by the Georgian authorities. The Georgian law also prohibits any economic and financial activities. Georgia and a major part of the international community consider Abkhazia and South Ossetia, which make up 20% of Georgia's land area, to be occupied territories and have condemned the Russian military presence there. History. After the Russo-Georgian War, on 26 August 2008, the Russian President Dmitry Medvedev signed decrees recognizing the independence of Abkhazia and South Ossetia as sovereign states. The Georgian parliament unanimously passed a resolution on 28 August 2008 formally declaring Abkhazia and South Ossetia Russian-occupied territories, and calling Russian troops occupying forces. Russia established diplomatic relations with both Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Russian troops were placed in both Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that a military presence in Abkhazia and South Ossetia was necessary to prevent Georgia from regaining control. Russian security forces were deployed along the demarcation lines with Georgia. Russians gradually withdrew from Georgia proper after the war, but they remained in Perevi. On 12 December 2008, Russian forces withdrew from Perevi. 8 hours later, a 500-strong Russian contingent reoccupied the village, and Georgian police withdrew after the Russians threatened to fire. All Russian troops in Perevi withdrew to South Ossetia on 18 October 2010 and a Georgian army unit moved in. In 2009, Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili mentioned in several addresses the fact that Russia was staying 40 kilometers away from Georgia's capital, Tbilisi, and aimed weapons at it. In the province of Racha, the bridge on the road leading to the Maymason Pass on the border with Russia was blown up in June 2009, and Georgian border guards allegedly pulled back several kilometers deeper into the Georgian territory. Mamuka Eshidze, a Caucasus affairs expert, said that the pullback could have been conditioned with the Georgian authorities' willingness to prevent clashes with Russians. In April 2010, the Foreign Relations Committee of the Parliament of Georgia appealed to legislative bodies of 31 countries, asking to declare Georgia's 2 regions, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, as territories under Russian occupation, and to recognize that the massive displacement of civilians from those regions by Russia amounts to ethnic cleansing. In March 2011, the Russians demanded village Ibga, situated on the Psou River in the northwest part of Abkhazia, to be transferred to Russia. During the existence of the Soviet Union, the village was divided into 2. The southern part belonged to Georgia and the northern part to Russia. It is claimed that Russia further demanded 160 square kilometers of land near Lake Ritsa in Gagara district, after the Abkhaz side proved that the southern part of Ibga belonged to the Georgian SSR. The claim on the village was dropped by Russia. On the 11th of June 2014, Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili generated controversy when he told the BBC News that Russia was not interested in annexing Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The opposition United National Movement criticized this statement, accusing Garibashvili of failing to defend state interests on the international arena. Russia signed alliance and integration agreements with Abkhazia in November 2014 and South Ossetia in March 2015. Both treaties formally placed the respective militaries of the breakaway republics under Russian command, while the agreement with South Ossetia also included provisions integrating its economy with that of Russia. The border between Russia and South Ossetia was also effectively dissolved, with customs being integrated. An aide to Russian President Vladimir Putin said in early 2015 that the border with Abkhazia should also be removed. Georgian officials have strenuously condemned the deepening of the occupied territory's economic and military dependence on Russia, calling it creeping annexation. Georgian officials denounced integration treaties signed between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Abkhaz and South Ossetian counterparts in 2014 and 2015 as attempts to annex the breakaway regions into the Russian Federation. Georgian law. In late October 2008, President Mikhail Saakashvili signed into law legislation on the occupied territories passed by the Parliament of Georgia. The law covers the breakaway regions of Abkhazia and the territory of former South Ossetian Autonomous Oblast. In February 2013, it was reported that the Georgian government was considering amendments to the law that would decriminalize entry into Abkhazia and South Ossetia from territories other than those controlled by Georgia and make it an administrative offense subject to financial penalty instead of prison term. On the 16th of May 2013, the amendments were made to the law on occupied territories of Georgia. Violating this law first time will entail administrative sanctions, not criminal persecution and imprisonment as it was before. According to the amendments, if a person crosses the border illegally first time she is fined for jail $400, while repeated violation is still a criminal offense posing up to 1 year of imprisonment, a minimum jail $800 fine. In July 2013, reports emerged that the actor Gerard Depardieu would be investigated by Georgian authorities for the violation of law. Georgian government representatives said that Depardieu visited Abkhazia's capital, Sukhumi, and met with the region's separatist leadership on the 1st of July without preliminary consultations with Tbilisi. In February 2014, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Georgia issued a warning to the visitors of the Sochi Winter Olympics that entering Abkhazia from the territory of Russian Federation would violate an international law, and the individuals going through the boundaries, uncontrolled by Georgian customs and border control, would be subject to prosecution by the Georgian justice system. The statement was a response to the earlier declaration by the de facto authorities in Sukhumi that they simplified visa rules for tourists seeking to enter Abkhazia during the Winter Olympics via the PSOU border crossing point. On the 15th of April 2014, after annexation of Crimea by the Russian Federation, Ukrainian Rada adopted the law on ensuring protection of the rights and freedoms of citizens and legal regime on the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine. Ukrainian law is based on the Georgian law on occupied territories. Overview. According to the Georgian law titled Law on Occupied Territories of Georgia, the term "the occupied territories and territorial waters" or "the occupied territories" covers the territories of the Autonomous Republic of Abkhazia, Skin-Valley region and waters in the Black Sea located in the aquatic territory of the Black Sea, along Georgia's state border with the Russian Federation, to the south of the Psou River, up to the administrative border at the estuary of the Anguri River. The term also covers the airspace over the aforementioned territories. The law restricts free movement and economic activity in the territories. In particular, according to the law, foreign citizens should enter the two breakaway regions only from Georgia. Entry into Abkhazia should be carried out from the Zugdidi district and into South Ossetia from the Gori district. The legislation also lists special cases in which entry into the breakaway regions will not be regarded as illegal. It stipulates that a special permit on entry into the breakaway regions can be issued if the threat there serves Georgia's state interests, peaceful resolution of the conflict, occupation or humanitarian purposes. Citizens of foreign countries and persons without citizenship having entered Georgia from Russian side through Abkhazia and South Ossetia, who seek asylum in the country are not subject to punishment. Any economic activity is prohibited regardless whether or not it is implemented for receiving profit, income or compensation. If under the laws of Georgia, on licenses and permits, on entrepreneurs, on bee farming, on museums, on water, on civil registry, on electronic communications, the Maritime Code of Georgia of the Civil Code of Georgia, such activity requires a license, permit, authorization or registration, or if under the Georgian legislation, such activity requires an agreement but it has not been granted. Any transaction related to real estate property and concluded in violation of the Georgian law is deemed void from the moment of conclusion and does not give rise to any legal consequences. The law's provision covering economic activities is retroactive going back to 1990. The law prohibits international air traffic and maritime traffic, railway traffic and international automobile transportation of cargo. The law also prohibits the use of national resources and organization of cash transfer. The law says that the Russian Federation, the state which has carried out military occupation, is fully responsible for the violation of human rights in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The Russian Federation, according to the document, is also responsible for compensation of material and moral damage inflicted on Georgian citizens, stateless persons and foreign citizens who are in Georgia and enter the occupied territories with appropriate permits. The law also says that de facto state agencies and officials operating in the occupied territories are regarded by Georgia as illegal. The law will remain in force until full restoration of the jurisdiction of Georgia. Criticism. In 2009, the Committee on the Honoring of Obligations and Commitments of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe asked the European Commission for Democracy through Law for an opinion on the law on occupied territories of Georgia. The Commission's resulting March 2009 report criticized the Georgian law. The law was at odds with UN Security Council resolutions that were binding both on the Russian Federation and on Georgia. The report said that the law raised concerns with regard to humanitarian access to the conflict-affected areas. The terms used in Article 2 contradicted 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Limitation on free migration may be in contradiction with the Georgian international engagements. The Commission also stressed Georgia's obligation to respect the 1951 Refugee Convention. The Commission also criticized the law's lack of clarity, saying that the text of the law is not clear. Quote, In its aspects dealing with private property, it might have violated Article 1 of the First Protocol of the European Convention on Human Rights and the principle of proportionality, as well as additionally violating further aspects of the Hague Convention. A restriction and criminalization of economic activities was contrary to the rule of customary international law, and also the IV Geneva Convention. The Commission also recommended to insert a clarifying provision into the law regarding basic documents issued by legal authorities concerning the personal status. In 2012, the European Commission considered that Georgia's continued application of the law on occupied territories was a concern for the effectiveness of the engagement strategy with the breakaway territories, and in 2013 noted that there had been no change to the restrictive aspects of the law, but that it hoped for a more relaxed implementation of the law from the new government in Georgia. International reaction. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan issued a statement in which it called on the citizens of Azerbaijan to refrain from traveling to Abkhazia and South Ossetia without permission of Georgian authorities, and warned that these trips were considered illegal, and the travelers would be punished accordingly. The ministry also referred to these territories as territories that are out of control of its government. Belarus advised its citizens to abide by Georgian laws when traveling to Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The Foreign Ministry of Belarus stated that Belarusians should only use entrance points on the Georgian side. In response, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Grigory Karasin said that the recommendation of Belarusian government was strange. The Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a warning for its citizens in connection with the adoption of the Georgian law on occupied territories. Foreign Ministry of Ukraine has advised the citizens to fulfill the provision of international law and refuse to cross the border from the Russian side. The Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued special guidelines for its citizens attending the Sochi Olympics. According to the guidelines, travel to Abkhazia and South Ossetia from Russia without warning the Georgian side is prohibited and punishable. France's Ministry of Foreign Affairs released guidelines to travelers from the Sochi 2014 Olympic Games. The official Spectator Guide included a special note recommending French citizens to abstain from visiting Georgia's regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The guide stated it was a punishable crime. The United Kingdom Foreign Office advised against all travel to Abkhazia and South Ossetia, stating the British government does not recognize the unilateral declarations of independence made by the de facto authorities in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The Foreign Ministry of Estonia warned its citizens that traveling to Abkhazia and South Ossetia is illegal and punishable without permission of the Georgian government. Russian position. Russia claims that Abkhazia and South Ossetia are not occupied territories but independent states. The Russian Federation also holds that it does not at present, nor will it in the future, exercise effective control over South Ossetia or Abkhazia, and it was not an occupying power. It also noted that, despite having crossed into the territory of Georgia in the course of the conflict, Russia was not an occupying power in terms of IHL. According to Russia, the number of Russian troops stationed in South Ossetia and Abkhazia does not allow Russia in practice to establish effective control over these territories, which total 12,500 square kilometers in size. On the 14th of March 2012, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Russia was ready to lift visa requirement for Georgian citizens in case of repealing by Tbilisi its law on occupied territories, when he announced that all Russian citizens could travel to Georgia without visa. He forgot to mention that a law on occupied territories is in force in Georgia, according to which anyone who has visited South Ossetia or Abkhazia since war, which was launched by Saakashvili, will face criminal liability in Georgia with jail term from 2 to 4 years. RIA Novosti news agency quoted Lavrov as saying while addressing the lawmakers in the State Duma. In June 2013, Russian Foreign Ministry asked Georgia to abolish the law on the occupied territories of Georgia. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Grigory Karasin claimed that the abolition of the law would create a favorable environment for cultural exchanges, above all for tourist trips. Situation on the ground. Currently 20% of Georgia's internationally recognized territory is under Russian military occupation. Russia does not allow the EUMM monitors to enter South Ossetia and Abkhazia in violation of the 6-point ceasefire agreement. The United States Department of State published the Human Rights Report in 2011, where it is underlined that de facto authorities of Abkhazia and South Ossetia are supported by several thousand occupying Russian troops since 2008. The de facto Abkhaz authorities restricted the rights of ethnic Georgians to participate in the political process and to exercise basic rights. Since 2008, the de facto authorities of South Ossetia have refused to permit ethnic Georgians expelled during and after the 2008 war to return to South Ossetia unless they renounced their Georgian citizenship and accepted a Russian passport. No international party was able to monitor the extent of the Russian military presence. Media in the occupied territories was tightly restricted by the de facto authorities and Russian occupying forces. The report prepared by the National Committee on American Foreign Policy and the Institute for the Study of Human Rights raised concerns that Russia not only failed to withdraw, it expanded territory under its control beyond the pre-war conflict zones, and Russia established a troop presence in 51 villages it did not control before the war and conducted military patrols on territory it did not previously hold. The report also describes Russian military presence in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Russia also deployed new weapons systems, such as attack helicopters and tanks, where they did not exist before the war. By October 2010, Abkhazia and South Ossetia became host to Smerch-type offensive rockets, Tochka-U, and S-21, a tactical rocket that can carry nuclear cluster or chemical agents up to 150 kilometers. S-300 surface-to-air missiles were based in Abkhazia. Russia signed 49-year lease agreements with automatic 5-year renewals in Ghouta and Skin Valley. Russia has built 5 permanent military bases in South Ossetia manned by approximately 5,000 security personnel. Another 5,000 are based in Abkhazia. Both deployments include regular army troops, border guards and FSB personnel. Russia's Ministry of Defense revamped its military command in the North Caucasus, linking it to Russian forces in Georgia. Quote, in one of the Georgian villages in South Ossetia, Russian forces bulldozed the Georgians' houses and built new military bases in the places for the Russian 58th Army. A report by International Crisis Group found that as Russia has control over Abkhazia's borders, roads and sea, it does not need a heavy permanent presence. Russia can move military equipment and troops into and out of Abkhazia at will. However, there is the heavy Russian military and FSB border guard presence along the Abkhaz-Georgia proper administrative boundary line in the Gali district. 2013 Human Rights Reports. Georgia mentions that there were abductions along the administrative boundary lines of both occupied regions in 2013. De facto officials of the occupied territories and Russian officials continued to detain people for their illegal crossing of the administrative boundary line. Media in South Ossetia and Abkhazia was still restricted by the authorities and Russian occupying forces. De facto authorities and Russian forces in occupied Abkhazia and South Ossetia restricted the movement of the population across the administrative boundaries for healthcare and other services. The quality of education in occupied Abkhazia and South Ossetia was reportedly poor, according to Elizabeth Cullen-Dunn and Michael S. Bobic. This situation is called occupation without occupation, and is a distinctive form of warfare. Vladimir Putin's form of warfare is the spectacle of dominance that creates docile populations within the new geographic boundaries of Russia in Europe. The key element of strategy is to use the separatist regions as perches from which to intimidate the larger states that once administered them. A creeping occupation and subsequent takeover of strategic positions in the breakaway regions aim at re-establishing control over Russia's near, abroad, by occupying breakaway provinces and establishing military bases from which to threaten occupation of the rest of Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. Russia can influence the actions of the sovereign states. The war without war and occupation without occupation is more flexible and cheaper than a real occupation, since the potential target can be rapidly changed.